This interview is part two of a conversation I had with Fernando Anelucci. To recap part one, Fernando has built a $240 million self-storage business using other people's money. In this part of the conversation, he shares with us how he buys underperforming properties and turns them into literal gold mines, how he builds trust with investors, and how he uses creative marketing to find off-market deals. This had to be one of my favorite episodes, and I am so stoked to share it with you. If you found any value out of it, please hit that like and subscribe button. I'm still a small channel, and I appreciate every single one of you guys. Let's get to the interview. So this is the part two. In the first part, we talked about your self-storage syndication, how you were able to find massive scale with that, and the books and education that help you to implement these systems to run such a big operation. And so with this part two, I'd kind of like to talk about personal insights, how you were able to create a mindset that led to your success. That being said, you said that learning to raise money was the most important skill that you've developed. How were you able to actively learn that skill? And then what education helped with this?
Yeah, so it all started, I think I was 23 years old, and I actually hired a business coach. So I did a 1-year contract with the business coach. They were in real estate. They raised money for projects, syndications. And so that was where I got my first set of rules on how to raise money and where to go find that money. So one of the very first things he told me, which is, I'm going to paraphrase here, is to go where money goes. And typically money goes to places where people with money can't go. So these are places like, places where you have to pay just to get into the door, usually a large amount to get into the door. So think of membership clubs, yacht clubs, golf clubs, mastermind groups. And I'm talking each of the things I'm listing off, I've paid on the minimum side, 10 grand just to be in that group, all the way up to 35 grand a year to be in these places. And it's because typically, these high net worth individuals, they want to pay for exclusivity or exclusion, if you will. So that was the very first part, but that didn't really help me raise the money. That just told me where the money was. And then from there on, I started learning how to raise capital based on books that I was reading. So the first that I read, I believe it was called It's a Whole New Business. It was a real estate syndication book. The other one I read was the big book on real estate syndications. And then from there, I started branching out. I said, okay, now I know kind of the concept of how to raise money, how to structure a syndication. Then I went out and just actually started reaching out to real estate syndication attorneys to give me an idea of how this is supposed to look, how their other clients are raising capital. And then the last piece I had to try to really work on was the actual pitch itself. There's two resources. Anytime somebody asks me, hey, Fernando, I need help raising capital, what do you suggest? I always give them these two resources first. I say, read Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. It's a book on how the mindset of someone that is being pitched works. And, a lot of people, when they try to pitch somebody, they start with the boring stuff. They start with the numbers and Excel sheets and graphs. And that is the fastest way to lose an investor. When you're doing a pitch, what you want to do is appeal to what, Oren Klaff calls the crocodile brain. And that crocodile brain is kind of the oldest part of the human brain that is there to sense, is something new and novel and thus needs more exploration. And conversely, is something dangerous. If something is dangerous, it's going to shut me off from everything else and I'm going to try to hide, right? So that's what you got to approach first before you get into the 20 minutes of running through numbers. And you'll actually see, if you go watch any of my, capital raise presentations, the section on numbers is very short. And I literally say, hey, this is a brief overview. If this is a deal that is exciting and interesting to you, then you can go take your own time and review through the due diligence docs and run the numbers yourself. But to make somebody sit through a 50-minute presentation where all you're doing is going by line through an Excel graph or an Excel sheet, you're killing your conversion rate. So that's the first thing. So then I said, okay, now I know kind of the psychological concept of how to raise money. How do I actually create the presentation itself? And then what I give people as a second resource that ask me to, for help is go watch a TEDx talk. TEDx Stockholm, it's called How to Avoid Death by PowerPoint. It's about 20 minutes, very concise. The presentation he's giving on how to avoid death by PowerPoint is on PowerPoint just to show the example. And the main concepts from that are the PowerPoint presentation is a guide to the presentation. It isn't the presentation itself. You are the presentation. So use it that way. That's the way it's supposed to be meant to be used. So the way our attention works as humans is we're attracted to movement, to contrasting colors, and things we don't want to do are read large blocks of text on a PowerPoint presentation that completely kills the presentation itself. But there's a lot of amazing concepts in that TEDx talk that I really recommend anybody that's going to raise capital. If you want kind of the 80-20, you want that 20% to start getting 80% of results, read Foreign Class Pitch Anything, and then watch that TEDx talk, How to Avoid Death by PowerPoint.
I think there are so many interesting things of what you just said, and I want to hit on a couple of them because you talked about how you tried to first get in front of these people and you spent a ton of money. Did you actively do that? And then it was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't quite the way to go, because you said you did pivot after that.
Yeah. So it's not that I pivoted. It's, when I started joining these groups, mastermind groups and, exclusive clubs, I was getting in front of the right people, but I was not effectively pitching my strategy. But just by being in front of the right people, you're already going to get some success as opposed to just trying to, pitch anybody off of the side of the street. So that helped a lot. And then as I learned more and more about marketing, what we started to do is say, hey, it's less about being in front of those people, but having access to them, and then having some type of strategy where you can pull their attention to you as opposed to you trying to push your deals onto them. So that's when we developed that social media strategy of creating, expertise in a field. So, educate the market to dominate the market. And then by getting a lot of content out there, by doing these types of podcasts, people start to realize who I am. They know my life story. They've seen all the deals I talk about. And then now they're signing up for my, investor list. So now I have those same people, those high net worth individuals, instead of me having to pay to get into those rooms, they're now coming to me. Now, that doesn't mean I pivoted away from that. I still think that masterminds are an extremely important thing to be a part of, because you can bounce information off of people that are in similar situations in business, both, the good stuff and the bad. And that has helped the business extraordinarily. But yeah, as far as the pitching goes, it went from, trying to pitch people in person to actually creating a multi-channel strategy to get people to come and actually sit into my virtual room to then be pitched.
Okay. So yeah, you didn't pivot. You just kind of stacked then. You stacked these
Correct.
tools on top of each other,
Right.
got to the next level. Okay.
Right.
Without giving away any secrets, can you walk us through the process for structuring deals with investors?
Yeah. So what I learned early on is that, you have to start learning a little bit of some complicated math. You don't actually need to learn it yourself. You just need to be aware of it and then allow Excel to do it for you. So one of the things that is ubiquitous in the investment community is something called an internal rate of return. Now, internal rate of return allows you to compare apples and oranges as if they were apples to apples. So what internal rate of return basically means, the dumbed down version, is that $1 today, if I give you $1 today on your investment, that dollar is worth more than if I were to give you that same dollar a year from now, right? Because someone could say, hey, your return is 100% return. I say, okay, that's great, 100% return. Do I get that 100% return in a day, or do I get that 100% return in 50 years? Because both of them are true, right? They're both 100% return. If you use an internal rate of return calculation, it discounts dollars that you get in the future. And the longer it takes to get, the farther into the future, the more of a discount those dollars get. And so that's how typically smart money will analyze deals, is internal rate of return. So how do we structure these deals? We look at what is the going market rate for similar risk profile deals, and you find that number. It may be, let's call 18 to 22% internal rate of return. And then we back into a structure that allows us to hit those numbers for our investors. So typically there's 2 or 3 tranches of money coming to that investor. Let's say as an investor, you put in $100,000. The very first tranche is what's called a preferred return. So that is the first money that comes out. 100% of that money goes to the investor. And if you're unable to hit that preferred return, then it accrues over time, and then you have to pay down that debt of preferred return. So let's say I structure a deal where you give me $100,000, and the preferred return, the first tranche, or what they call the first hurdle, is an 8% preferred return. That means every year, before I even get to see any part of that profit, the first $8,000 that come out of that deal go straight to you. Now, after that preferred return is met, then we do some type of pro rata split. So it may be after, an 8% preferred return to our investors, then it's an 80-20 split. 80% of the profit goes to the investor, 20% goes to us as the sponsor. And then, depending on what type of investor you have, if they're extremely sophisticated, there may be multiple hurdles. So it may be an 8% preferred return. Then after that bucket, then it's an 80-20 split, then a 70-30, then a 60-40, and then maybe you get to a 50-50. It just depends. And then once you put all of that math into Excel, it'll kick out your internal rate of return. So it's literally, I do it kind of backwards, where I start with the IRR target that everyone needs. And then I create the preferred return and the waterfall structures behind it in order to get to that number. So every deal can be a bit different, but what's pretty standard in, real estate syndication is like an 80-20 over an 8, 80-20 split after an 8% preferred return. But again, it's completely individualized and every deal can be super different.
Staying on the investor topic, you've created this machine of content where people are now attracted to you and coming to you. What does that look like? How does someone reach out to you, and how do you go, okay, this guy would be a good fit, this girl would be a good fit for us. We can help them find some returns. What's that look like?
Yeah. So like I said, we start kind of with the credibility piece, all of the social media content, all of our podcasts, all that stuff. And then usually what I find is that, a lot of capital raisers, they put so many friction points in between them and the actual money, which doesn't make sense. It's, go to my social media channel, and on there will be a link in my bio that takes you to my website. And then on the website, there'll be a call scheduling link that you have to fill out a form, and then someone may pre-vet you, and then you may or may not get a chance to speak with the CEO. And that's a lot of friction points to someone that wants to give you their money. And one of the things that we learn about sales is the second someone reaches out, that is when they are the most motivated. So the longer it takes for them to get their job accomplished, or whatever it is, to give you money or to buy your product, etc., the lower their motivation is dropping from that point of when they actually reached out. So one of the things that I do is I just give people my cell phone number on literally everything, all podcasts, all social media. If you go onto anything that has to do with us or me out there in the internet, right there, it has my email address and my cell phone number. It's crazy how when you look at all these other investment companies, you cannot reach anyone directly. You have to go through all these convoluted structures. So that's one of the very first things that we learned. The second piece is, okay, now they reached out. Let's say they found me through my cell phone on a podcast. I say, hey, I would love to chat with you. I'm in a meeting right now, but here's a calendar link. And I text it to them. Here's the calendar link. It takes 30 seconds to fill out. And then that way you can find a slot that works for you, as opposed to playing this back and forth game of, well, are you available at 1? It's like, I'm not at 1, but I am at 3, but I'm not available at 3. So it's about, it's wasting time. And in that calendar link, it has like a couple questions. It asks, are you an accredited investor? Have you invested in passive real estate before? What type of returns have you experienced when you have invested in passive real estate? What is your contact information? And then allows you to schedule a call with me. And then when I'm chatting with them, I talk with every investor that wants to give us money. So we're not like one of these blind shops, like, some giant fund or anything like that. I talk to every investor because not every dollar is created the same. There is such a thing as bad money or bad investors, and that come in many forms. That could be an investor that, he wants to be a passive, or he or she wants to be a passive investor, but then they want to talk to you every day. They have questions and they can't wait for the quarterly updates. That's, now you're taking time away from me doing the strategy that's going to make you money. So what you're not realizing, you can't micromanage a passive investment, because then it is not a passive investment anymore. And you're taking away from the productivity and eventually the profitability of your investment, right? So I'll do a vetting process. Not only that, but then I'll also see, like, can you afford to lose this money? Investing involves risks, as you've seen every disclaimer on every investing commercial ever. Investing involves risk, and there's are you able to handle losing your entire investment? If the answer is no, like if you're giving me your lunch money to invest, I'm not the right guy for you, right? Because we deal in real estate. It's extremely illiquid. So if something comes up in your life and you need to pull your $100,000 out, I can't just force a sale on a value add project that's going to take 3 to 5 years, right? Then we're going to have to sell at a loss. So you need to be able to be patient capital, and you need to be able to have excess reserves truly for investments, right? You can't be using your life money, car money, food money, mortgage money. You can't be investing that stuff. And unfortunately, nowadays, I have been seeing an uptick in those types of investors because of the prevalence of Wall Street bets on Reddit, where people are like, I'm going to YOLO my college, loan into some crazy investment. And so those types of people, when they call me, I say, listen, I can't work with you. Even if they are accredited, I know a lot of people that they may pull in $1 million a year, but they spend $1,010,000 a year. So they don't have truly any free cash flow. So it's just, there is an investor vetting process. So once they come in, let's say they will go through the phone call with me, we vet them out. They are what seems like to be an ideal investor. Then at that point, they get added to an email distribution list. And anytime we get a new deal that's available, they get that email along with all of our other investors that says, here's some high level deal points on the deal. Why we think you'll like it. This is the reason why we like it. If you want to learn more, go to this website. And on that link, it'll go to a website page that will have a 15-20 minute overview video that is built a la, how to pitch anyone and also how to avoid death by PowerPoint. And if that's the video to get them excited about the investment. And if they're excited about the investment, then they can go into the investor portal. They can review all the due diligence documents. They can do all of the, compliance things of, signing an accreditation letter and signing a subscription agreement and a joinder to the operating agreement. And at that point, they can make their investment.
I think what you said, especially about the cell phone and reducing friction, has got to be like the coolest thing I've ever heard. The first thing that comes to mind when you said that is, and I wonder how many other people think this too, is, and maybe you thought this too when you were setting it up, is how many problems do you get? Do you get lots of spam calls on your phone and a lot of problems that way?
Yeah, believe it or not, I don't get many. And, I've been on probably almost 100 podcasts to date now. Every one of them I've given out my cell phone number, and you think people would be blowing me up all the time. And it's not the case. Yep. It's funny how many people are very passive in their strategy of reaching out. And so at least, let's say maybe they heard my cell phone number, they write it down, but instead of calling me, they go to my website or they follow me on social media. And then they book a call using some of those other means that I have on those websites. As far as the spam and all that stuff goes, I mean, modern day, as long as you're using a good carrier, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, what have you, they're pretty good at blocking known spam callers. And the ones that do get through, it'll show up on my phone and it'll say, this is likely a spam call. Don't answer it. So I'll just let it go to voicemail. If it's a spam call, they usually don't leave a voicemail unless they're trying to, renew my car warranty. And if it isn't a spam call, I can see live time the voicemail being transcribed, and I can literally pick it up during the voicemail and say, hey, sorry, I was jumping off of another call. How can I help you? Right. So it's not as bad as you.
Okay, that is so cool. You've credited the book Traction with having major impact on your business. Can you share an example of a pivotal decision or change that you've made after reading it?
Yeah, absolutely. The what they call level 10 meetings is a once a week meeting with all ownership and all department heads. That is a invaluable meeting to have as a business owner, especially as you're growing. Even if it's just you or it's just you and a partner, and you don't have any department heads yet, it is extremely important because then the structure of that meeting, it's broken down in the book itself, but it allows you to go through everything in your business very quickly. Our meetings usually last an hour to hour and a half once a week on Wednesdays. That's it. And it says, what are the issues that we're facing that we can't solve? I need help from other people in the company, or maybe we can brainstorm about how to solve those issues. We cover all of our deal pipeline. We cover our short-term goals, like our weekly goals. But then we also cover our quarterly, what they call rocks, our quarterly goals that lead into our 1 year plan. Our 1 year plan leads to our 3 year, and our 3 year leads to our 10-year target, right? And so constantly having a meeting every week saying, are we on target to hit our 10-year targets? I want to be whatever, $1 billion company. Broken down, here's what the steps that we need to be doing on a weekly and daily basis. Are we doing those things? And then you have a scorecard that we go through, which is our weekly scorecard, to make sure everyone in the company is doing what they need to do to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. So that has been absolutely fantastic from the book Traction. Another thing that I love that they teach in that book is how to assess your people. Not only do you have the right people, but do you have the right people in the right seats, which we talked about before. So I really recommend people go read it on your first, go through. I've read it, and I probably read that book once every 18 months just to get a refresher. And it got to the point where I loved it so much, I actually hired somebody from their company to come in and implement the EOS system from Traction into our company.
I hear a lot of accountability. It's a lot of goal setting that you stay on point and a lot of accountability.
Correct. Yeah. I always tell people, as a business owner, it's hard to be accountable, especially if, let's say, you're a solopreneur and you're the only person in your company. It's hard because, I always tell people willpower is fleeting. We don't have a constant level of willpower, as anyone that's ever tried to go on a diet could tell you, right? So the key is how do you externalize that accountability? even as a solo entrepreneur, right? It's like making public statements. I'm going to be, in 2 years, I'm going to own 15 self-storage facilities, whatever it is. And then having people check in. It's like, oh, last Thanksgiving, you said that you were by this time this year, you were going to buy another 2 to 3 self-storage facilities. Where are you with that? And then it's like, oh, now you're at Thanksgiving dinner. If you didn't hit your goal, that's going to be a pretty tough conversation, right? Pretty embarrassing. So yeah, accountability is a huge piece of being a business.
There's a book I was looking to see. I couldn't remember the name of it. It's Willpower Doesn't Work by Ben Hardy. And it talks a lot about how, willpower is fleeting. You don't have it all the time. And it's just like a muscle. You use it, it wears out. So you've talked a lot about marketing books and so much that you've learned from them. Is there any other marketing education that you can talk about that you've learned that's made a massive impact in your business?
Yeah, I mean, anything by Dan Kennedy is absolutely fantastic. The unfortunate part is that he writes like a book a year. So there's like millions of books out there, but he has some absolutely wonderful stuff. If you're looking to specifically shore up the marketing side of your business, wonderful resource.
So there's a question I like to ask every entrepreneur I interview. I think it gives the audience a little idea of how you came to be where you are. And that is, what was your childhood like? Did you always want to run your own business, always have that entrepreneurial drive?
Yeah, interesting. So I was raised by 2 immigrants that came to the United States from Brazil. When, just put yourself in the mindset of an immigrant just to begin with. To be able to literally drop your entire life and then move to a foreign country where you may not know the language so well, and then have to start from basically zero and build something up. There's already kind of a built-in hustle for those types of people, right? And then what you'll find is a common, denominator in immigrant families is the stress and importance of education. Typically, that stress is on formal education. So going to school, getting good grades, going to a good college, getting good grades, and then working as a employee in someone else's company. So up until I was about 16 years old, that was kind of what I was raised around. My parents would constantly point out things and say, hey, whether it was true or not, look at that person begging for money on the street. It's probably because they didn't go to University of Illinois. Something like ridiculous, right? They would say stuff to me like that, but just to stress the importance. And so my entire upbringing, I always thought that there was only one way to make money, and that was to be an employee. And I thought that was literally how life worked. And then when I was 16 years old, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad truly was kind of the dichotomy of his poor dad, which traditionally very successful person, the superintendent of all the schools of Hawaii, high W-2 earner. And then his rich dad, which was his friend's father, who was a business owner and showed that there's other ways to make money where you can control more of your time, you can control more of your energy, and then you get outsized returns. Because if you're not working on your dream, you're working on someone else's dream, right? If you don't own the company, you're working for what someone else wants you to be doing. And then the second thing that was interesting in that book is that I found out that the tax system is very unfair to employees. So the tax system, everyone thinks that the tax code, which is over 70,000 pages, is meant to raise revenue. That's not the case. Less than 1% of the tax code is about revenue generation. The other 99% is about incentivizing the American public to do what the government wants them to do. So everyone says, oh, you're using tax loopholes. I'm just like, no, that's not the case. It's because employees aren't doing, the things the governments want. Usually in a very broad sense, the government wants you to do 3 things: create jobs, create housing, create energy. If you do any of these 3 things, you are not taxed, or you're taxed at a lesser rate. If you don't do these 3 things, you are penalized. And then most of your income goes to taxes. Look at high earning W-2 employees. So doctors, for example. Doctors, 50% of their income goes to the government. That's insane, right? And then not only does 50% of their income go to the government, but then look at how the money flows to them. Let's say you have someone that's an employee that makes $100,000 and you have a business owner that makes $100,000. The employee, they get their $100,000. Then all their taxes are taken out. Let's say you have $60,000 left over. Then you pay for all your expenses. Let's say you have $20,000 left over. And then you buy all of, your necessities of life and investments. And then maybe you have a little bit of money to save afterwards. But you're taxed on the top line number. Business owners, it's the opposite. You have your income comes in, 100,000. Then you get rid of all of your expenses, which if you know what you're doing, you can wrap a lot of your personal expenses into your business. So then you have all this money left over. Then you make your investments. And then whatever's left over from your expenses and investments is what you get taxed on. So this person over here that's making $100,000 may pay $40,000 in tax. And this person that's making $100,000 as a business owner, once it gets down to it, they may only be paying $2,500 in tax because the government wants them to do the things that they're doing. So when I read that book, then I realized, okay, maybe I need to start focusing on being a business owner. And, my parents would kill me if I didn't go to school. So I did go to, I did get a formal degree. I'm an engineer by training. But while I was at University of Illinois, that's when I started, doing the business owner stuff. So when I was 19 years old, I ran a painting company where I would, take a bus home on Fridays. I would knock on doors, which is probably the hardest type of sales you can ever do, is door-to-door sales. You learn how to deal with rejection very quickly, right? And then I'd book paint jobs for these people, and then over the summer I'd hire my friends, and we'd go paint houses over the summer. And that first summer as a 19-year-old, I made $65,000. So isn't that crazy? Wow. 19. The funniest part is I finished my degree, and my first engineering job, I did get a job at a Fortune 50 company working for Dow Chemical, and my salary with them was $55,000 a year. So after $100,000 in education costs, getting a very good degree at a very good school for that degree, I was making less than I was when I was 19 running a business, just to show you how crazy it is. So, I didn't last long. I had 13 months in that working for Dow Chemical, and already within 6 months, I knew I was going to quit, but I had to start, moving finances around to start my next business venture. And by the time I was 23, I already started. I quit the 9-to-5 world and never looked back.
Yeah, that's your eye-opening moment when you're like, nope, this ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna do it.
Right.
I've heard you recommend Rich Dad Poor Dad for people who feel stuck. Beyond reading, what are some actionable steps people can take to get started in real estate or self-storage?
Yeah. So I always tell people, fail early and fail often. So what that means is you're not trying to actively fail, but when you fail, you learn lessons, and it's easier to fail when you're younger and when you don't have a lot of cash and assets to your name, because it's a lot easier to start over, right? Not only that, but then also, leaving the comfort. The thing about being a 9-to-5 employee when you're trying to start a business is the longer you stay a 9-to-5 employee, the higher your salary goes. So then when you're deciding to start a business, it's hard to say, okay, well, as a 23-year-old to replace a $50,000 salary is pretty easy as a business owner. But let's say you're 45 and you have a $150,000 salary. That is a lot harder because then you assume, hey, if I'm going to start a business, I need to be making at least $150,000 or else it's not worth it. So I'd say, fail early, fail often, but that's not the only thing. I've known people that started businesses when they were retired. They retired and then they started a business, 65 years old. If you really focus, within 5 years, you should be able to be pretty successful with whatever business venture you choose. I always say, choose businesses that are easy and repeatable, have been around for a long time. So real estate, for example, real estate is probably like the second profession of the world, and there's no reinventing the wheel. You buy a property, you improve its value, you sell it, or you buy a property, you rent it out, you collect the rents. Very easy. So, starting companies like Uber or Facebook, those are, 1 in a billion company, but there's literally hundreds of thousands of ways to make money as a business owner that are way easier than trying to create the next best thing, the next thing that's better than sliced bread. So I'd say, make sure that you're doing that. Also, it's very important to watch who you spend time with. I know this is a cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. So if you're spending time with people that have no initiative, don't want to, better their lives, or are constantly complaining, and are woe is me victim mentality, guess what? You're going to start bleeding into that type of existence as well. So, going back to what I talked about masterminds, I really enjoy masterminds because it automatically puts you around successful people. And yes, it may be expensive to get in. I mean, for example, I joined a mastermind when I was young with my partner, and we didn't even have the money to get into that room. So we put it on credit cards because we knew just by being around these people, that investment would have come back 10 plus fold. And it did. And now we have these very large networks that, we're learning about business, we're growing together. I can tap them for investments, I can tap them for tax strategies, etc. So again, another cliche. It's a cliche because it's real. It's your network is your net worth. If you just hang around, fast food workers all the time and are not trying to, build, what is a fast food worker going to know about running a business? Probably not a lot, right? Nothing against people that work in fast food, but that's not a way to financial freedom. It's just how it is.
For my last question, where can people find more about you and your business?
Yeah, like I said, easiest way to contact me, area code 630-408-8090 for those that are brave of heart. If you're more of a passive person, check us out on our website, ssse.com, or you can follow us on any social media channels that we have. We post a bunch of educational content about how to do self-storage, and you can reach out to us at literally any social media we have a profile on.
Fernando, you have shared so many interesting and amazing pieces of advice that people can use to take action. It has been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.